Welcome to the WinEH podcast. This show is focused on empowering ranchers. Whether you're a seasoned rancher or just getting started, we'll guide you on how to use the infinite banking concept as an alternative way to finance your operations. It's a better way to think about money. Join us as we discuss planning for the future, attracting the next generation, and the art of keeping more money within the family. Here's your hosts, Winnie and Lacey.
Hey over there. We are just so honored to be here with you today, and just the fact that you're choosing to lean in with us as we dive into some very basic money concepts, which is savings versus investing. It ought to seem super obvious, but I think there's actually a lot of different nuances that we may not particularly realize, that we're actually confusing the difference between the two things.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that, Lacey?
Yeah, when I think about savings, I think that, and I've heard you say this before too, savings, the definition of savings is knowing that money is going to be there when we need it. And so let's talk about an emergency fund first. For instance, we had this conversation this week. An emergency fund is money that we want to be accessible to us when we need it, right at our fingertips. When I think about investing, I've always thought, and Reed and I have had these conversations, I talk about him lots, he's my best friend. We always thought, okay, when we think about investing, we got to be willing to lose that money. And if you don't have your emergency fund per se, where you know that it's going to be there when you need it, when you do access it, because you're going to. There will come a time, life happens, life throws us lemons at times. So is that money going to be there when you need it? What if you invested your emergency fund and then it's gone?
It's interesting. I find that, even though it seems like very primary colors, it's just a very simple concept, savings, investing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it has really come to my attention since having hundreds and hundreds of conversations with folks well into their adulthood who really have discovered that they don't truly understand it, that they've mixed the concepts up unknowingly because it's just been either they weren't super hyper-focused in how they engage with their money for most of their life, or it's the way they go about. Once they move out, they know they got to put their money to work for them. And they also know that they got to save money. And right, wrong, or indifferent, it is the way that it is. But it is truly taking a look at, no one's ever really taught us, there are certain characteristics that we need to really take a look at when it comes to, regardless of where we put our money, is it really investing or is it really savings? But then riddle me this: registered retirement savings plan, tax-free savings account, right? Now, let's just break it down what that all is. So when you first hear the title, tax-free savings account, what is the instant thing that comes into your mind? Define that for me. What do you think that is to you?
Well, instantly, it makes you think, well, that's exactly what it is. So your money, you can save your money in there. It can either grow tax-free or you can access it tax-free. It could be interpreted two different ways, and that it is a savings account. So if I'm putting my dollar in there, then when I need or want that dollar, it's going to be there. And
so interesting.
The fees. I don't think the fees are disclosed. We had a client earlier this year who paid thousands of dollars in fees on their tax-free savings account.
Right. So outside of the fees, it's really about that growing aspect. Okay. So traditionally speaking, whether you put it in the bank or not, if you're the type of person who's more cash and you say, okay, well, I'm going to put, every time I make $20, I'm going to put it in this jar, let's just say, or it's either that $20 in this side account. and then it's just there. But it's like a completely separate act. Maybe you might throw, like, if you are used to doing that, like, the banks always advocate for, like, oh, throw it into our high interest savings account or something, right? And you can actually grow your money, but it only grows to the interest rate in direct relationship to what is the total amount of money that's there, right?
Yes.
But as soon as if you have 1,000 in there, it's growing at 2%, but it's not going to keep growing at 2% if you take out $200. Now it's going to go 2% on 800 instead of 1,000. You know what I mean? So like there's lost interest, right? But still, that is traditional savings. You're just putting it in there. So like, let's say if you're saving for a car, or let's say if you're saving for your taxes, or let's say if you're saving for your next vacation, it's going to be there. But the tax-free savings account is actually, like, when you say you can grow it tax-free, so that implies that one of the characteristics is you can invest it. So if we separate it out, what does investing mean? What do you instantly think of?
Invested into the marketplace and the risk of loss. That's where my mind goes.
Yeah, potentially. Like, but there's also like a chance that it could grow.
Yeah, definitely.
Now it means something, but it means something completely different now. But they labeled it as if it was a savings account. So now your mind has written it off as if it's safer than it really is. Correct. And we wonder why there's a more difficult time to discern what's the truth. And the trust, never mind, like, these are financial products on the market offered every day. There's so much noise out there. It's like, oh, more transparency. Well, what about, like, why don't we start labeling things for what they're supposed to be and stop lying in the financial marketplace?
Why do the banks feel like they need to be misleading in order for us to put our money into those accounts?
Well, let's just talk about, is it really the banks?
No, it's the government
decided to label it. Like, let's just take a look at who actually is control of those programs, who actually put a title to the name of those programs, and then who executes it. The government made up the program.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The government made it up and the government controls it.
And then the banks get to execute that, right? Like, they're the ones that basically are the arm length representatives of the government programs.
I think, like, this conversation and in hearing you talk, like, I'm just soaking it all in here. It makes me go back to the question of who's in control.
It does.
Do I want to put my money where I know that it's going to be there? Do I want to put it where I'm in control? Or do I want to rely on the government to have my best interests at heart?
Well, I would say, like, that is definitely a needed layer of consideration, especially if you're whatever financial vehicle you're going to use for the function of saving or for the function of investing. But I wanted to sort of peel the onion back to acknowledge the fact that throughout our entire lifetime, our need for money is greater than our need for the death benefit.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of bringing that in, not to necessarily confuse, because I have to remember that each episode could be listened to on its own, right? So just understand that this is, every time you're listening to us, it's pretty much, it's focused, but it's like an ongoing conversation. So when we're talking about death benefit here, just know that it really relates into coming back to the focus of how you can use the infinite banking concept in your life. And I'm going to kind of tie it back into savings and investing. So throughout our entire life, there is a need to save, and there is also a need to grow our money. It's just about, like, how can we do it in such a way that we are clear and in control, like you say, right? And a part of it is really discerning what it is that we're putting our money into, the characteristics of it, and does it meet your short and long-term goals?
So a question to throw back at you is, what would you say to someone who says, well, can I do both?
Absolutely, you can do both. Absolutely, you can do both. in order for you to feel the same way that I do with confidence, like that you can do both, requires further exploration in terms of, number one, the way that you think about how you're going about utilizing your cash in your life. And also number two, exploration into a different financial vehicle that will allow you to do both.
Right. Effectively, yeah. So that's really good. And it gets me really excited. I want to put myself in the listener's seat. And so absolutely, you can do both. So let's define savings. So you want to have money accessible to you when you need it. But what if you also want to invest? So we're here to show you that the infinite banking concept can solve for both of those things. We're here to show you that there's an alternate place that you can store your money where it's liquid to you whenever life happens and you need it. But you can also take those same dollars and invest them if you want to, if you want to see them grow. And so you can do both of those things. Infinite banking the possibilities are exactly that. They're infinite.
Mm-hmm. And to circle back to understanding when we decide to put our money into something, what function does it actually play? Is it for savings? Is it for investing? All of those things. It also comes back down to when we take a look at if we put our money, let's say, into a tax-free savings account, for instance. Why do we want to save? And why do we want to do it tax-free?
Ultimately, all of us want to pay less tax, right?
Because it's an act of keeping more money, which is also about saving more money. So now we're also mixing in, we're talking about what are all the different ways in which we understand how we can save more money? The most talked about strategies to date has been tax strategies, actually. How can we save ourselves from paying more tax with the government? Which is its own ball of wax, and we're never going to solve it. We're not here to solve for what CRA does or how they operate or how they make our lives complicated and make us spend so much money. And anyways,
it's a little bit of a rabbit hole. And so I think too, in the environment that we've been in for the past few years, and we see the rising cost of living, just the rising cost of living, I think that just encourage you to think outside the box, learn about something that you haven't learned about before, and just encourage you to set some goals and learn. It's all about learning. It's all about learning. If you don't learn about it first, then you're not going to move forward.
Yep. And I would also say that investing, I think if we had more ability to keep more money in our pocket, which is what infinite banking is really all about, our desire to feel like we need to invest would be a lot less. And I think that a lot of people do get into investing because there are so many ways in which money can leave our pockets to which we have no control over. And some of those biggest aspects in our life is the interest that we pay, but also the taxes that we pay, right? And especially our understanding of the function of what are all the different nuances as it relates to saving and what it means to invest. So, Lacey, with everything that you were just sharing, keep learning, take us to the possible next best step that these folks can take on the other end.
Hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss an episode as we are getting into this whole new podcast. We're super excited, but you want to keep learning. So head over to our website, rancherway.com. We are so excited about our new website. You're going to want the book bundle. So there's 2 books, Nelson's book, Becoming Your Own Banker, and the brand new exciting version, Canadian version of Farming Without the Bank. So something specific for us Canadians.
So glad you leaned in with us on the WinEH podcast. We truly hope you're feeling more informed and empowered to take another step towards optimizing your financial life. Right now, make sure you hit subscribe so you can keep growing and learning with us. Until next time, we wish you prosperity in every area of your life.